I found out about the sabotage on a Thursday morning when our accountant called at 6:30, her voice tight with something between confusion and alarm. "Jordan, I'm looking at the company accounts and nothing makes sense. Every client payment from the past week has been refunded, funds have been transferred out, and I'm seeing transactions I never authorized." I was still in bed in my studio apartment in Atlanta, and my first thought was that we'd been hacked or that there was some banking error. I grabbed my laptop with hands that hadn't yet started shaking and pulled up our business banking portal. Our account, which should have had $52,000 from 3 major client contracts, showed a balance of $290. Below that, a string of transactions, each one systematically draining what Tyler and I had built together over 10 months, and at the bottom, a final transfer memo that made my blood go cold. "Thanks for the startup capital, partner. T." Tyler Morrison had been my best friend since sophomore year of college, the guy I'd lived with junior year, who'd been at every important moment of my 20s, who I'd trusted enough to build a business with when we'd both gotten sick of working for other people. We'd started TrendSpark Marketing together 8 months ago, equal partners, 50-50 split, both of us grinding 16-hour days to turn our freelance side hustle into something real. We'd celebrated our first $10,000 month together, had argued about strategy, and laughed about clients and made plans for the agency we'd build into something significant. I'd given him full access to everything, bank accounts, client relationships, operational systems, because that's what partners did and partners trusted each other. Apparently, I'd confused trust with naivety. Tyler had spent the past 3 days methodically destroying everything we'd built, stealing the money, canceling contracts, deleting client files, even sending emails from my account, telling our biggest clients that I was unstable and they should fire us immediately. He'd burned TrendSpark to the ground and disappeared, and I didn't even know why. The next 8 hours were a nightmare of damage control that couldn't actually control any damage. I called clients trying to explain that my business partner had gone rogue, but how do you convince someone to trust you when your own partner just sabotaged your company? I called our lawyer, who delivered the brutal truth. He was a legal co-owner with authorized access to everything. This isn't theft in the criminal sense. It's a civil dispute that'll take years to resolve through courts and cost more than you'll likely recover. I called Tyler's phone 17 times, and it went straight to voicemail every time. I called his parents, who said they hadn't heard from him in days and sounded genuinely shocked when I told them what he'd done. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting on the floor of our small office space. The one we'd rented together, decorated together, worked late nights in together, surrounded by the physical evidence of a partnership that had just been revealed as a lie. Tyler had taken everything, the money, the clients, the future we'd been building. He'd even taken my faith in my own judgment, because how do you trust yourself after you've been that catastrophically wrong about someone? My apartment that night felt like a crime scene I was forced to live in. Every surface a reminder of conversations with Tyler about our plans, our dreams, our partnership that was supposed to be built on friendship and shared vision. We'd sketched business plans on my kitchen table, had celebrated our LLC approval with cheap champagne on my couch, had stayed up until 3 in the morning on that floor working through pitch decks and pricing strategies. All of it contaminated now by the knowledge that he'd been planning this, or at least capable of this, the entire time. I made dinner from whatever I could find in my nearly empty fridge, eggs scrambled with old cheese and wilted spinach, and ate it while scrolling through Tyler's social media like picking at a wound I couldn't leave alone. His last post was from yesterday, a photo at the airport with a caption reading, "Sometimes you have to burn bridges to light your way forward. New city, new chapter, new empire." The comments were full of people congratulating him, completely unaware that the bridge he'd burned was our business, and the empire he was building was funded by betrayal. What hurt more than the money, or even the destroyed business, was the completeness of the deception. Tyler hadn't just been my business partner. He'd been my closest friend for 6 years, the person I'd called when my father died, who'd helped me move twice, who I'd trusted with things that mattered more than money. Every memory now felt suspect, every moment of friendship recontextualized as either genuine or performance, and I had no way to know which was which. Had he always been capable of this, or had something changed? Had I missed warning signs or had he hidden them perfectly? The questions spiraled through my mind until 3 in the morning, when exhaustion finally pulled me under. And even then I dreamed about standing in our office, watching Tyler delete files and drain accounts, while I stood paralyzed, unable to stop him. I woke up at dawn feeling like I hadn't slept at all, my phone showing 14 missed calls from creditors and clients, and the harsh morning light revealed my apartment for what it was: the home of someone whose entire professional life had just been destroyed by the person he'd trusted most. Tyler had won. He'd taken everything and disappeared, and I was left with nothing but debt, damaged reputation, and the kind of betrayal that makes you question whether you understand anything about people at all. The weeks after Tyler's betrayal were a special kind of hell where every day felt like wading through concrete, heavy and exhausting and suffocating. I picked up freelance copywriting gigs at $25 an hour, barely enough to cover my $200 rent and the ramen noodles that had become my primary food group. Sleep came in fractured pieces between 3 and 6 in the morning, my mind replaying every conversation with Tyler, searching for the moment I should have seen this coming, the red flag I'd missed because I'd been stupid enough to believe that friendship and business could coexist without one destroying the other. Friends stopped calling after the first few weeks of me being too angry or too depressed to be good company. My family knew something had gone wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain that I'd been betrayed by someone they'd welcomed into holidays and celebrations, someone they'd trusted because I'd trusted him. By October, 2 months after the sabotage, I'd become a ghost in my own life, going through motions without purpose, existing without living. What saved me from complete collapse wasn't hope or optimism or any healthy emotion. It was rage, the kind that burns cold and steady instead of hot and explosive. I started a notebook where I documented everything Tyler had done wrong, not just the betrayal, but the operational mistakes, the client mismanagement, the strategic failures that had made TrendSpark vulnerable to one person's sabotage. The business had been fragile, built on friendship instead of systems, on trust instead of accountability, on enthusiasm instead of expertise. Tyler's betrayal had exposed all of those weaknesses, and as much as I hated him for it, he'd also accidentally given me a blueprint for what not to do next time. I filled that notebook with lessons learned through pain. Never give anyone complete access. Never build a business that can't survive without any single person. Never confuse personal relationships with professional partnerships. Never trust without verification. The notebook became my Bible, and every page was written in the ink of expensive education. One night in late October, I was at the public library because my apartment had become too small to contain my thoughts, and I stumbled across a book that felt like it had been waiting for me. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the memoir of Nike's founder. I read it in one sitting, 3 hours straight in a corner chair while the library emptied around me, and by the time security told me they were closing, something fundamental had shifted in my chest. The book told the story of a man who'd been betrayed by business partners, sued by former friends, faced bankruptcy and sabotage and every obstacle you could imagine, and who kept building anyway. Not because he was superhuman or fearless, but because he decided that quitting would mean his betrayers had won permanently. There was a line that hit me like electricity. The cowards never started, and the weak died along the way. That leaves us. I realized sitting there in that empty library that Tyler wanted me to be weak, wanted me to die along the way, wanted his betrayal to be the end of my story. The question was whether I'd let him write that ending, or whether I'd take the pen back and write something he'd never see coming. I spent November building a new business plan with the kind of obsessive focus that comes from having nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The new company, I called it Velocity Digital, would be everything TrendSpark wasn't. Specialized instead of general, systems-driven instead of personality-dependent, built for scale instead of built on friendship. We'd focus exclusively on performance marketing for e-commerce brands, doing 1 to 10 million in annual revenue, charging based on results instead of retainers, using transparent ROI tracking instead of vague promises about brand awareness and engagement. Every decision was designed to answer the question, could this business survive if the person I trusted most decided to destroy it? If the answer was no, I redesigned until the answer was yes. By December, I had a 40-page business plan that assumed betrayal as a possibility and built protections against it, that separated operational access from financial control, that made the business valuable because of its systems rather than its founders. It was paranoid and defensive, and probably overcomplicated, but it was also bulletproof in ways TrendSpark had never been. The first client came in early December, a small jewelry brand run by a woman named Claire, who'd seen my LinkedIn post offering free performance marketing audits. I spent 3 hours analyzing her ad campaigns and showing her exactly how much money she was wasting on strategies that didn't work, then offered her a deal that was almost too good to refuse. I'd rebuild her marketing for 60 days, charge nothing up front, and if I didn't at least double her return on ad spend, she'd owe me nothing. If I did hit that target, she'd pay me $2,000 per month going forward. It was a gamble that put all the risk on me. But risk was all I had left to offer, since I had no money, no team, no reputation, and no reason for anyone to trust me beyond results I could actually deliver. Claire said yes. By the end of January, her sales had increased 180%. Her customer acquisition cost had dropped by half, and she'd not only signed on as a paying client, but referred 2 other e-commerce brands who wanted the same results. Velocity Digital had 3 clients generating $6,000 per month in revenue, and for the first time since Tyler's betrayal, I felt something other than rage and despair. I felt dangerous. I felt like someone who'd been kicked to the ground and was now standing back up with the knowledge of exactly how fights were won and lost. And that knowledge made me someone Tyler should have killed completely, because leaving me alive meant leaving me capable of becoming everything he'd tried to prevent. By March, 7 months after Tyler had destroyed everything, Velocity Digital had 15 clients and was generating $32,000 in monthly revenue, more than I'd ever made at TrendSpark, and built on foundations that couldn't be sabotaged by one person's betrayal. I'd hired my first employee, a data analyst named Maya, who'd been laid off from a tech startup and understood performance metrics better than anyone I'd interviewed. We worked out of coffee shops and co-working spaces, keeping overhead low and reinvesting every dollar into tools and systems that made us more effective. Every client contract included detailed performance tracking, regular reporting, and clearly defined success metrics, which meant nobody could ever claim we weren't delivering value or that results were subjective. The business was growing fast enough that I'd been able to move out of my studio into a 1-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood, had paid off the debt from TrendSpark's collapse, and had started sleeping 6 hours a night instead of 3. The transformation from broke and betrayed to stable and growing had taken 7 months of grinding work, but it felt like crossing from one life into another, entirely different one. What I hadn't expected was how much the betrayal had changed me in ways that went deeper than business strategy. I'd become harder, more suspicious, less willing to trust people's words over their actions or their intentions over their incentives. Maya was excellent at her job, but I'd structured her role so she had access only to what she needed and nothing more. Client relationships were documented in shared systems instead of living in anyone's head. Financial controls were separated from operational controls. Every partnership or collaboration was backed by contracts that assumed the worst-case scenario and protected against it. Some people would call this paranoid. I called it educated. Tyler had taught me that betrayal was always possible, that the people you trusted most had the most power to destroy you, and that lesson was worth every dollar he'd stolen because it had made me unbetrayable. The business I was building now couldn't be sabotaged by friendship turned toxic because friendship wasn't part of its foundation. Systems were, results were, accountability was. The growth accelerated through spring and summer in ways that felt almost inevitable once momentum had started. By June, Velocity Digital had 32 clients generating $84,000 in monthly revenue. I'd hired 4 more people, another analyst, 2 account managers, and a paid ad specialist who'd worked at a major agency and was tired of their corporate dysfunction. We moved into a real office space in Midtown Atlanta, nothing fancy but enough room for a team to work without being on top of each other. Industry publications started noticing us, running features about our performance-based pricing model and the transparent ROI tracking that set us apart from traditional agencies that hid behind vague metrics and long-term contracts. The Atlanta business community was small enough that people started talking, and I knew it was only a matter of time before word got back to Tyler, wherever he was, that I'd not only survived his sabotage, but had built something significantly more successful than what we'd had together. That thought gave me more satisfaction than it probably should have, but I'd stopped apologizing for taking pleasure in proving wrong the person who'd tried to destroy me. By September, exactly 1 year after the betrayal, Velocity Digital was generating $140,000 in monthly revenue with 47 clients and a team of 9 people. The business had grown past the point where I was involved in every decision or client interaction, which meant I'd successfully built the systems-driven operation I'd planned. We had documented processes for everything, redundancy built into every role, and growth that came from reputation and results rather than my personal hustle. I'd started getting offers from venture capital firms interested in funding expansion, from private equity groups wanting to buy the company, from competitors wanting to partner or acquire us. Every offer confirmed what I already knew. Velocity Digital was valuable not because of who'd started it, but because of what it had become, and that distinction meant Tyler's betrayal, as devastating as it had been, had ultimately forced me to build something better than I would have otherwise. The business that couldn't survive his sabotage had been replaced by one that could survive anything, and that resilience was worth more than any partnership based on friendship and trust that turned out to be conditional. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon in late September from a recruiter I'd worked with years ago. "Jordan, I have a weird question for you. Are you hiring for any entry-level positions at Velocity?" I told her we were actually looking for a junior analyst, and she paused before continuing. "Okay, well, I have a candidate who just applied, but I wanted to give you a heads up before sending his resume. It's Tyler Morrison. He listed TrendSpark Marketing on his resume as a company he co-founded that shut down, didn't mention you at all, and he's applying for an unpaid internship because apparently he's desperate for experience and references." The world seemed to stop moving for several seconds while I processed what she'd just said. Tyler, the person who'd stolen $52,000 and destroyed our business, was applying to work at the company I'd built from the ashes of his betrayal, and he apparently had no idea it was mine. The recruiter continued, "I figured you'd want to know before I sent his application through normal channels. What do you want me to do?" I sat there in my office looking out at the team working at their desks, at the business that existed because Tyler had tried to kill my last one, and I smiled for the first time in a conversation about him. "Send me his resume. I'll handle this personally." Tyler's resume arrived in my inbox 20 minutes later, and reading it felt like watching someone rewrite history in real time with shameless audacity. He'd listed TrendSpark Marketing as a company he'd co-founded and scaled to 6 figures before market conditions necessitated closure, with no mention of sabotage, theft, or the business partner he'd destroyed. His work history after TrendSpark was a patchwork of 3-month stints at startups that had either fired him or gone under, freelance projects that had apparently dried up, and a 6-month gap he'd tried to hide by listing independent consulting with no clients named. The resume of someone whose career had collapsed after burning the one bridge that mattered, who was now desperate enough to apply for an unpaid internship at a company he didn't realize was owned by the person he'd betrayed. I sat there reading it 3 times, and with each pass a plan formed in my mind that was both perfectly justified and potentially cruel, and I couldn't decide which aspect appealed to me more. I called the recruiter back within the hour and told her to invite Tyler for an interview, but not to mention my name or role at Velocity Digital. Let him think he was interviewing with HR and a hiring manager, keep everything normal until the moment it wasn't. She hesitated, sensing something in my tone, but agreed when I assured her this wouldn't blow back on her professionally. The interview was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 in the afternoon, which gave me 6 days to decide exactly how I wanted this to play out. Part of me wanted to reject him immediately, to email him a simple application denied and let him wonder why. Another part wanted to bring him in, reveal who I was, and watch him squirm before telling him to get out. But the part that won, the part that had spent a year building a business specifically designed to be unbreakable, wanted something different. I wanted Tyler to work here, to see every day what I'd built from the ruins of his betrayal, to understand exactly what he'd underestimated when he'd assumed destroying TrendSpark would destroy me. Thursday arrived with the kind of anticipation I hadn't felt since signing my first major client, a buzzing energy that made it hard to focus on anything else. I'd arranged for Tyler's interview to start in our main conference room with Sarah, my head of operations, who'd conduct the first round without knowing the history. I'd watch from my office via the security camera feed we used for remote interviews, and then I'd join for the final round, where candidates met the CEO. My team knew something unusual was happening. I'd been too distracted all week for it to go unnoticed, but I hadn't explained why, and they were professional enough not to push. At 1:55 in the afternoon, I pulled up the camera feed on my laptop and watched the reception area, my heart doing something between racing and stopping, as I waited to see if Tyler would actually show up, or if some instinct would warn him away from the trap he was walking into. At 2:03, Tyler walked through our front door, and seeing him for the first time in a year hit me with a complicated wave of emotions I'd thought I'd processed, but apparently hadn't. He looked different, thinner with cheaper clothes and the slightly desperate grooming of someone trying to appear more successful than they were, haircut in a way that suggested a budget salon instead of the place he used to go. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than one bad night, the kind of exhaustion that comes from months of things not working out, and doors closing and realizing you've burned bridges you needed. He checked in with our receptionist, sat in the waiting area scrolling through his phone with the nervous energy of someone who really needed this to work, and I felt absolutely nothing resembling sympathy. This was the person who'd stolen $52,000 from me, who'd destroyed a business we'd built together, who'd sent emails from my account calling me unstable to our clients, who'd disappeared without explanation or apology or consequences. Whatever struggles he was facing now were the natural result of his own choices, and I felt no obligation to care about them. Sarah came out to get him at 2:08, and they disappeared into the conference room where I couldn't see them anymore, but could hear through the open audio feed. The interview proceeded normally for the first 20 minutes, Sarah asking about his background, his experience, why he was interested in Velocity Digital. Tyler's answers were smooth but generic, the rehearsed responses of someone who'd been interviewing a lot lately without success. When Sarah asked about TrendSpark, Tyler launched into a practiced explanation about market challenges and partnership disagreements, painting the failure as a mutual decision rather than his solo act of destruction. My business partner and I had different visions for the company's future, and ultimately, we decided it was better to part ways than to let those differences compromise our work. It was a difficult decision, but the right one. I listened to him lie with the casual confidence of someone who'd told the story enough times to believe it, and I had to admire the audacity, even as it made me want to walk in there and expose him immediately. But I waited, letting Sarah finish the interview, letting Tyler think he might actually have a chance at this position before I showed him exactly whose company he'd just applied to work for. Sarah wrapped up her portion of the interview at 2:35, and I watched through the camera as she told Tyler he'd done well and that the CEO would join them shortly for a final conversation. Tyler nodded, looking cautiously optimistic, adjusting his tie and checking his phone while he waited alone in the conference room. I gave it 3 minutes, long enough for anticipation to build, short enough that he wouldn't get suspicious, and then I stood up from my desk, straightened my jacket, and walked down the hall toward a conversation I'd been imagining in different forms for 12 months. My hand was steady on the door handle, my heartbeat was calm, and when I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the expression on Tyler's face made every second of the past year worth it. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened slightly like he was trying to form words that wouldn't come, and the color drained from his face as he realized exactly what was happening. I closed the door behind me, sat down across from him with the table between us, and smiled the way you smile at someone who's just walked into a trap they built themselves. "Hello, Tyler. It's been a while." My voice was calm, almost friendly, which seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. He tried to recover, his mouth working for several seconds before sound came out. "Jordan, I didn't know you worked here. I didn't know this was your company." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. Worked here? Tyler, I don't work here. I own it. Velocity Digital is mine. I built it after you destroyed TrendSpark and stole everything we'd created together. You're sitting in my conference room in my company, applying for an unpaid internship at a business that exists because you tried to end my career. I watched him process this, saw the calculations happening behind his eyes as he tried to figure out if there was any way to salvage this situation or if he should just leave. He chose to stay, which told me exactly how desperate he was. Jordan, listen, about TrendSpark, I can explain. I held up a hand, cutting him off before he could launch into whatever justification he'd prepared. I don't need explanations or excuses or apologies, Tyler. I needed those a year ago, and you were too busy spending the money you stole and trashing my reputation to provide them. What I need now is to understand why you're here, applying to work for me after what you did. He shifted in his seat, and I could see him weighing how honest to be versus how much to perform. I've been struggling, he finally said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. After I left Atlanta, things didn't go the way I planned. The money ran out faster than I expected, and turns out that burning bridges in a small industry means nobody wants to work with you when word gets around. I've been barely surviving for 6 months, and this internship showed up on a job board, and I was desperate enough to apply even though it's unpaid. I didn't know it was yours. If I had known, I wouldn't have... He trailed off, and I finished the sentence for him. You wouldn't have applied because you knew I'd never hire you. Or you wouldn't have applied because facing me means facing what you did. Tyler looked down at the table, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes, and for the first time since he'd walked in, I saw something that looked like genuine shame rather than just fear of consequences. Both, probably. Jordan, I know what I did was wrong. I convinced myself at the time that I was owed that money, that I'd done more work than you and deserved a bigger share, that you'd held me back somehow. It was bullshit rationalization for theft, and I knew it even then, but I did it anyway because I was selfish and stupid and thought I could get away with it. He finally looked up, and there were tears in his eyes that might have been genuine or might have been performance. I'd learned the hard way that I couldn't tell the difference with him. I destroyed the best partnership I ever had, burned the best friendship I ever had, and for what? Some money that's been gone for months and a reputation so damaged I can't get hired anywhere. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you not to destroy me more than I've already destroyed myself. The words hung in the air between us, and I sat with them for a long moment, feeling something complex that wasn't quite satisfaction and wasn't quite pity. Tyler had sabotaged our business, stolen my money, damaged my reputation, and disappeared without conscience or consequence. And now he was sitting across from me, broken and desperate, asking me not to make things worse than they already were. The old Jordan, the one who'd trusted him enough to build a business together, might have felt sympathy or even forgiveness. But that Jordan had died the morning I'd seen our empty bank account, and the person who'd survived was harder, smarter, and focused on a very different kind of justice. I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table, and looked Tyler directly in the eyes. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you the internship, unpaid, just like you applied for. You'll work here for 6 months, learning how a real business operates, seeing every day what I built from the ruins of your betrayal. You'll report directly to me, and I'll make sure you understand exactly what you tried to destroy. At the end of 6 months, if you've shown genuine effort and growth, I'll write you a reference letter that might help you rebuild your career. But if you screw up even once, if you show any sign of the person who sabotaged TrendSpark, you're out immediately with nothing. Do you accept those terms? Tyler stared at me like he was trying to determine if this was mercy or punishment, and I let him wonder because honestly, I wasn't entirely sure myself. Tyler started at Velocity Digital the following Monday, and watching him walk through the doors of a company built from the ashes of his betrayal gave me a satisfaction I hadn't known I needed. I assigned him to work directly under Maya, my data analyst, doing the grunt work that nobody else wanted. Pulling reports, organizing spreadsheets, cleaning data sets, attending client calls but never speaking. The tasks were legitimate and necessary, not busy work designed to humiliate, but they were also humbling for someone who'd once been a co-founder and now was the lowest person on the totem pole. My team didn't know the full history at first, just that Tyler was an intern who needed close supervision, but word spread quickly in the way it always does in small offices. By the end of his first week, everyone knew he was the ex-partner who'd sabotaged my previous business, and the looks he got ranged from cold professionalism to barely disguised contempt. Nobody was cruel, but nobody was warm either, and Tyler existed in a social isolation that was probably more punishing than anything I could have designed deliberately. The first month was awkward for everyone, Tyler most of all, as he learned to navigate an environment where his past actions were known and his current position was precarious. He showed up early every day, stayed late when asked, completed every task without complaint, and maintained a level of humility that seemed genuine, even if I wasn't sure I could trust it. During team meetings where we reviewed client results and celebrated wins, I'd watch him sitting in the back, taking notes, seeing in real time what a successful agency actually looked like. Transparent metrics, documented processes, team collaboration, clients who renewed because they were getting results rather than being locked into contracts they couldn't escape. Everything TrendSpark should have been but wasn't. Everything we could have built together if he hadn't decided to destroy it instead. I never mentioned this directly, never rubbed his face in the contrast, but I didn't need to. The evidence was visible every single day in the business that thrived, while he struggled to rebuild basic credibility. By month 3, something had shifted in Tyler that felt different from the performative humility of someone trying to avoid consequences. He started asking questions during training sessions, genuine questions about why we structured campaigns certain ways or how we measured success differently than traditional agencies. He stayed late one evening, helping Maya troubleshoot a data issue without being asked, and she mentioned to me the next day that he'd actually been helpful and seemed to care about getting it right. He wrote me an email after a particularly successful client presentation, asking if I'd be willing to explain how I'd structured the pitch, because he wanted to understand what effective client communication looked like compared to what we'd done at TrendSpark. The email was respectful and specific, acknowledging our past without dwelling on it, and I found myself agreeing to spend an hour walking him through the presentation framework. It wasn't forgiveness, not even close, but it was something like recognition that people could change if they were willing to face what they'd done wrong and learn from it. Month 5 brought a moment that felt like a test neither of us had planned for. One of our major clients was threatening to leave over a billing dispute. They claimed we'd charged them for services we hadn't delivered, and they had email receipts that seemed to support their accusation. I spent a frantic afternoon digging through records trying to understand what had happened, and it was Tyler who figured it out. Our billing system had a bug that had sent invoices for the wrong service tier, making it look like we'd overcharged when we'd actually delivered everything we'd promised. He stayed until midnight, helping me compile the evidence to prove our case, never once complaining or asking for recognition, just doing the work because it needed to be done, and he had the skills to help. We saved the client, kept the $8,000 monthly contract, and I found myself genuinely grateful for Tyler's help in a way that felt uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Afterward, sitting in my office at midnight with cold pizza and exhaustion, Tyler said quietly, "Thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. But working here, seeing what you built, understanding what we could have had if I hadn't been so stupid and selfish, it's taught me more than any success ever could have. Whatever happens after this internship ends, I want you to know that I'm genuinely sorry, and I'll spend the rest of my career trying to be someone worthy of the partnership you gave me the first time." His voice cracked on the last words, and I believed him in a way I hadn't believed anything he'd said in years. The 6 months ended on a Friday in March, exactly 18 months after Tyler had destroyed TrendSpark, and exactly 6 months after he'd walked into my office not knowing it was mine. I called him in that afternoon for what he probably assumed would be either his exit conversation or the reference letter I'd promised. Instead, I offered him a choice. "You've completed the internship and honestly exceeded what I expected. You could leave now with a strong reference letter that would help you find work elsewhere, and we'd part ways professionally. Or, and this is not an obligation, you could stay at Velocity Digital as a junior analyst with a real salary and benefits. Not because I've forgiven what you did, because I'm not sure I ever fully will, but Because you've proven over 6 months that you're capable of being someone different than who destroyed our partnership. The question is whether you want to rebuild your career here, in the shadow of what you tried to destroy, or somewhere else, where the past doesn't follow you every day. Tyler stared at me for a long moment, processing the offer, and I could see him weighing the easier path of starting fresh somewhere else against the harder path of staying and proving himself in the place where his betrayal had been most visible. He chose to stay, which told me more about his character now than any apology ever could. Velocity Digital continued growing. We crossed 200 employees and 15 million in annual revenue within 2 years, expanded to 5 cities, and became one of the most respected performance marketing agencies in the Southeast. Tyler worked his way up from junior analyst to senior analyst, to eventually leading his own team, never forgetting where he'd started or what he'd done to get there. We were never friends again, couldn't be after what had happened, but we became something maybe more valuable. Colleagues who'd learned hard lessons about trust and betrayal and redemption, who'd built something successful, not despite our painful history, but in some ways because of it. People sometimes ask me why I gave Tyler a second chance after what he did, and the answer is simple. I didn't do it for him. I did it to prove to myself that I could build a business so strong, so successful, so unbreakable, that even the person who'd tried to destroy me could work within it without threatening what I'd created. That's not forgiveness, it's power. And sometimes, power is the best form of moving forward.